Good morning, this is Khalid Malik's Morning Jam on FM91. It is now time for Green Hour. For our most recent episodes, make sure you're watching on YouTube. That is FM91 on YouTube, The Green Hour. Joining us this morning, he is an author of books, a column writer, a campaigner for citizens' right to information, equality and a healthy environment. Earlier, he was studying aerospace and manufacturing engineering. Joining us today as we talk sewage treatment in parks, Janab Naeem Sadiq Saab. Good morning and welcome to the show.
Thank you. What is the problem with sewage? Sewage by itself has no problem.
Right.
Spreading it is a problem.
Right.
Sewage is a useful resource which could give us many useful things. But to waste sewage and to throw it all over the place in all water bodies, lakes, rivers, seas and open spaces is a problem. It adds to pollution, it adds to disease. And many people don't want to talk about the fact that Pakistan's polio problem is hugely related to its sewage, because people reuse the same water mixed with their normal water lines, and therefore they keep getting into this problem. So while the focus remains on vaccinations, the issue of polio, for example, can never be resolved till you fix up the issue of sewage. So this is how important it is.
You know, it's Naeem Saab, no one's ever said it that way, and I think, you know, often and which is why I love Green Hour so much, because it gives us sort of real life applications and how it affects us all, and to have it described this way completely changes perspective. And it's scary to think that if that is the case, and we seem to be, as an excerpt from this article, we're sinking in our own sewage, why are we so sort of, well, whatever about it?
It is almost impossible to explain a level of insanity that we have on many critical issues. For example, my stated point is that Pakistan is certainly headed for a huge disaster unless it can control its population. But there is no emphasis on population control in Pakistan. Okay, so that is a short disaster that Pakistan will run into, regardless of what other measures that it might take. Likewise, sewage is, if one is not pushed about the biggest problem, that is disaster and population, then sewage seems to be a minor item on that list.
So break it down for us. How do we measure this, and how big of a problem is it? How big is it?
Well, Karachi alone produces about 500 mgd, which is million gallons per day of sewage. So typically what happens is that if you give 700 or so million gallons to a city, then it will produce about 500 million gallons as sewage. Pakistan on the whole as a country therefore produces roughly 10,000 million gallon per day of sewage. This entire sewage unthinkingly, carelessly, ruthlessly goes into various water channels. Some bit of it goes into ground and some bit of it goes into lakes, canals, rivers, seas. Now, and thereby spreading pollution and contamination and disease.
Right.
The important thing is that we are not only throwing our very precious resource to external bodies, but we are also spreading disease. अब ये जो resource है ये बहुत अहम है. अगर आपने देखा होगा कि there is a huge fashion of talking about climate change, of greening the place, of area under forest, of high temperatures that are catching up on us, and so on. Everyone is talking about them, but talking, as you know, does not do much good to humanity. It is actions which do good. So there is this 500 million gallons a day which is only available only in Karachi to be reused. Now there are methods to reuse or recycle or extract back the entire good water from the sewage or septic water. So we have in the past tried some traditional methods of doing so, in the sense that Karachi had built 3 treatment plants.
Sewage treatment plants,
जिनको STP भी कहते हैं, about 40 years back, and they were for some time functioning well and meeting the needs of that time. Gradually, because we are unable to maintain systems, we have very little discipline about them. They have all become useless, dysfunctional, and some of them have been taken over by housing. Machinery has been stolen. The employees have become ghosts, and therefore the water is now going into the sewage is going into the routine nalas. दूसरी बात ये होती है कि उनकी जो कॉस्ट है वो इतनी ज़्यादा है कि वो पाकिस्तान अफोर्ड ही नहीं कर सकता. For example, the current estimate for the sewage treatment plant for Karachi is 42 billion rupees. It started off by 7 billion rupees in 2007. अब वो 3 साल के बाद 12 हो गए, फिर 15, फिर 18, 20, अब 42 billion हो गए हैं.
This is to service
Karachi.
Oh, just Karachi.
Just Karachi. Now, because there is no decision on this, so in another few years it will be 50, 60 or 100 billion gallons, and the higher it goes it becomes more impossible. What we are proposing is a natural method of treating sewage, which is called constructed wetland method, which uses nothing but trees, plants, a special kind of plants, and stones.
And I want to get into this natural method, but
Yes.
something interesting you said just before, something about when the decision is made, or there was something about you just said in the sentence earlier. Why is there a delay in this decision-making process?
In
Because
principle,
clearly it's a problem.
Yeah, in principle, they have a decision.
Okay,
Make it.
like much else.
Yes. That is to say, make it.
Right.
So they say, okay, we need this year we'll need 3 billion. तो 3 billion वो लेके कुछ ना कुछ उसका बन जाता है. उसके बाद अगले साल वो कहते हैं now we need so much more. So the value keeps going up.
So there's a common theme that seems to be across all of our Green Hour episodes, and that is the failure of institutions. As you've also pointed out, as so many of our other guests, that the laws are there, the decisions in principle have been made, but there is complete and utter failure in terms of implementation and carrying that forward. So my question to you is, which government institutions are failing? That's the first part of the question.
This seems to be somewhat non-environmental question.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, if I may very briefly say on this,
Yes.
that if you build institutions on basis of professionalism in a manner that they are neutral to all political forces and positive only to excellence of their own job, then
right.
they work. But as you can see in Pakistan, neutrality is almost shunned and looked down upon, and political parties demand that the organizations should not be neutral and favor either one of them. Okay, now this is destroying organizations. To my mind, all institutions and all government organizations must at all times remain professional, secular, neutral to their jobs. So, because that does not happen, one party comes in and they just employ few hundred people, largely ghost people of their own party.
Right.
So, okay, so they are carrying just their flag, not the job. So this is the problem. So
And again, that's if we go deeper in, we'll just open a Pandora's box.
Yes.
But you mentioned a more sort of natural way, what seems to be a more cost-effective way of treating this.
There are numerous ways of treating sewage, from very sophisticated to very simple. At the sophisticated end, we have tried, which involve equipment, large tanks, pumps, showers, and machines, and regular maintenance.
Right.
We seem to have tried them, wasted all that money, and become zero after doing all that.
Right.
We do not have the necessary professional ability and the discipline to maintain those kind of plants.
Right.
What we are proposing is the simplest of all, which is called constructed wetland method, which involves bringing your sewage water at a point and then letting it settle down in a tank for some time so that there is sedimentation and the heavy matter settles down.
Right.
The rest of the liquid flows into a passage which consists of, let's say, 4 feet of pebbles,
right,
and in them are planted various kind of bacteria eating plants. So you are making nature to eat bacteria and to eat the sewage, and therefore purifying it in that process.
It's almost like a filtering system.
It's like a filtering system. So there are two things which are happening simultaneously. Some stuff is being stopped by the pebbles or stones, and the bacteria is being eaten up by the plants. So as it goes down maybe 50 feet or so in that channel, the water coming from that other end is clean water. It is not drinkable water, okay, but it is good enough for reusing in plants. Now imagine that we have numerous of these kind of constructed wetlands. You do not need a single plant of this kind for whole Karachi, because whenever you talk of big plants, their first requirement is huge amount of piping to bring sewage to them.
Got it.
One reason why the plants in Karachi have failed is that the mechanism or pipelines of carrying sewage from various locations miles away to those plants could not be made. Okay, this system that we are proposing requires no carrying of sewage from any place to any place. It just comes into that local area where it is falling.
So these are local setups.
Local setups. So there could be 1,000 such plants in Karachi. For example, on Liari and Malir River, after every 1 mile or every half a mile, there could be a plant like this. So it is no piping is coming to it. Remember, this piping is the largest expense of the whole of this conventional system. So in every treatment plant like the one that we are suggesting, at the end of it is a small lake. A very small lake or a huge pond, should I just say. So the same water falls into that pond, and from there onward it can be reused in the same area, in the plants and the trees. क्योंकि जब हम ये कहते हैं कि हमको ट्रीज लगाने हैं, ग्रीनरी करनी है, पार्क्स बनाने हैं, तो उन सब के लिए तो पानी चाहिए होता है ना. तो this city does not have water to drink.
Correct.
You know this. There is a crisis on that. So if people don't have water to drink, you cannot imagine giving water to plants. So therefore this whole talk of plantation is irrational, or it does not consider the fact that you basically need water. Okay, so what we are proposing is that every park of Karachi, and Karachi has 1,600 or plus parks, should have a sewage treatment plant of its own based on constructed wetland methodology, and reuse that water. Likewise, Malir and Liari and other nalas should have dozens of these plants, and they cost next to nothing.
I was just going to ask you, so what is the comparative?
Well, maybe 1 to 100.
Okay. It's quite a lot.
Actually 1 to 100. So it's almost negligible.
Yeah.
So because you are not using any machine, you don't need maintenance, you don't need staff, you are once creating a certain passage or a tank, and then a subsequent passage for pebbles and stones and plants. Of course, it does need a bit of maintenance every year or so. You will probably need to clean.
But less so than
almost negligible.
The more sophisticated.
Almost negligible. Yes.
And so, when you say we've proposed or we've suggested, again, what is the feedback
mechanism,
and what is the way forward there?
To begin with, this is not a new proposal.
Right.
2 years back, NED University did a research on this, and they actually proposed 50 such sewage treatment systems in Malir and 50 in Liari River along the bank. Because you're not asking for any extra area. Area is already given to you by nature. Okay, you're just utilizing it. And therefore there are numerous studies on this, and there are about a half a dozen such plants already available and working in Karachi. Starting from a very small one in a urban forest park in Clifton to Navy has using some of them, Air Force is using some of them, and some other parks are also using.
Right.
Okay. So this is hugely possible, except that there is no big money for contractors in this. There is no big money for politicians in this. So nobody is very keen on any project which has no money in it. Okay.
It sounds like it falls on the shoulders of the private sector again. That's what it feels like. That a few dedicated and passionate individuals will band together and do something about it themselves, rather than at a more sort of provincial or
I always look at Pakistan level as a country.
Yeah.
Okay. So countries are run by governments. So good citizens can make small changes or prototypes. But they cannot create those entire systems. If Pakistan has to treat its entire sewage, then it must make a policy that every city, every town, every village, every park will have a sewage treatment system. Nobody will throw 1 gallon of sewage outside. By the way, that's already a law.
Right.
ये आज का law नहीं है. ये तो 50 साल का law है ना. And there is an organization called SIPA and EPA which are supposed to ensure that this law is followed. They do not ensure that. Okay. So if the government decides that this is how it should be, they will be able to do that because there is no money involved. Unfortunately, when there is no money involved, there are very few interests.
Exactly. Just for clarification, can you tell us the difference between a natural wetland and an artificial wetland?
Yes. There are. This one, the one I am talking about, is something that you make yourself. Okay. But within nature, there are similar kind of systems which have been always there. There have been outflows of various liquid outflows, which are in the form of rainwater or sewage water, which go into areas, large areas where there are trees, and they keep on the trees and plants that are at all times doing a natural process of filtration.
It's the new segment on the Green Hour. We call it Quickfire. Throw a set of questions at you and see how we go. What does sewage contain that needs containing? That's our first question.
Okay, there are two kinds of sewages. One is domestic and the other is industrial. The domestic sewage, I guess everyone is familiar with it.
Correct, yeah.
What it contains. Sure. It contains two kind of sewages. One is typically called grey and the other is called black. The black is the stuff that goes into your commode and then comes out from there. The grey is the rest of it, where you wash your hands, where you wash your clothes, and where you wash your dishes. Okay, the other kind is the industrial one, which has all kind of chemicals. And the ones which go into the dark sewage or the black sewage is containing bacteria, and it contains very high BOD, COD, which needs to be gotten rid of.
BOD, COD meaning?
Biological oxygen demand and chemical oxygen demand.
Okay. You mentioned grey water and black water. Can they be used to make clean water, drinking water?
Every water, however black, can be used to make drinking water, and there are now some machines which have been made in the world which can do that. But that is a very costly and high-tech stuff. Typically, if you can simply reuse the water for park, green, plant, trees, then you have done a very good job of reusing the water, because currently we are wasting that. Most homes can reuse their grey water. If they were to divide their entire output into two pipes, one containing the grey and the other black, and let the black go into the gutter line, and like in my house, I use the grey water for my own garden.
You know, you've spoken about solutions. Who will implement the solution?
Every municipal committee of Pakistan, every KWSB equivalent organization of Pakistan, can and should and ought to undertake this task. It's not a favor, it is their responsibility, it's their legal responsibility. These people should be in jail if they are not doing this job.
What can you and I and people who are listening or watching do to help the situation?
We need to stand up. We need to say this is a problem, and we need to give viable solutions, and we need to also say that if you do not do this, we demand legal action and you to be spending the rest of the time behind rooms which have metal bars in front of them.
And how can we take further action? Is there a petition that we can submit, etc.? How do we...
Okay. Now that is a very interesting point, because that point involves how to cause a change. And there are, unfortunately, that science is not known in our part of the world. To my mind, in a humble manner, I think it first of all requires a high level of conscientious citizens, them coming together, brainstorming to figure out what is the problem and what are the solutions, and doing research on those solutions so as to be able to document and state that in writing. Everything must be stated in writing, otherwise it is really not a solution. You can keep saying different thing every day. And last aspect is advocacy, is to be able to take up those issues with the concerned government departments, with people, raise people's awareness levels as well, so that more and more people join this voice.
Sadiq Sahib, if we want to get in touch with you, if we want to know more, how do we get in touch with yourself?
Well, I am an ordinary citizen, often walking on the road, so therefore there is no issue of how anyone can get in touch with me, and I have an email address called naeemsadiq@gmail.com, so that is not an issue, and you have my phone number.
naeemsadiq@gmail.com if you want to know more. In sort of closing with this installment of Green Hour, when I go back home, what should be my we all have our own takeaway from this conversation, but what would you really like for all of us to sort of take heed to and remember?
Right. Nothing happens unless there is a thought. It is a thought which is the beginning of a change. If we have no thought and we just have desires, then nothing useful can come out of them. So first point is to be able to have a thought that there is this issue. Next stage is to do research on it as to what are the facts and what are the possible solutions. Thoughts without research and facts are again useless. The third stage is to be able to document the entire subject, to be able to articulate and document by documenting, writing. If we don't do that, then again we are wasting time. Once we do that, next stage is to go public, to say this is the problem, this is the issue. For example, you opened this program by a certain quotation. The quotation was from an article called Sinking Under Our Own Sewage.
Correct.
And you didn't read the next point. Uske aage likha hua tha, and the way out. And how to get out of that. Okay. Now that is a public document. It's appeared in the newspaper, which means somebody has stood up and taken a position and said, ye problem hai, ye iska solution hai. So the last stage is advocacy. Advocacy ki phir bahut si methods hote hain. One good method is for a small group of people to come together and follow the Margaret Mead method. Never doubt that a small group of committed citizens can change the world. And indeed it is the only method of changing the world. So that's how it happens.
Thank you very much. Naeem Sadiq Sahib joining us on this installment of Green Hour. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you
for joining us this morning. Our next installment, don't forget, Wednesdays at 10 a.m. and keep watching our YouTube channel on FM91. That is the Green Hour. Thank you very much.
FM91 presents Green Hour on Khalid Malik's Morning Jam. Watch the episodes on digital platforms of FM91, News 1 and TV 1.